Welcome to the Patterson Foundation's Nonprofit Thrivability podcast. I'm your host, Read Corley, podcast producer and consultant with the Patterson Foundation. Patterson Foundation's Nonprofit Thrivability initiative shares opportunities for organizations to strengthen their mission impact by embracing a thrivable operating model. This week we speak about Fueling Dynamic Fundraising. It is an opportunity for nonprofits in our region to learn and implement research-backed fundraising principles and techniques. Organizations that participate in Fueling Dynamic Fundraising strengthen their fundraising capability through a multi-day, in-person course designed and presented in partnership with the Fundraising School at the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. This week we are speaking with Megan Howell, founder and executive director of Second Heart Homes. Solving homelessness is no easy task, but Megan is attacking it head-on by providing temporary and permanent housing for those single adults with mental illness who are experiencing homelessness. If there's anything that can help Megan out, it is more funding. As we know, housing in our area can be expensive, so any additional dollars that Megan and her team can fundraise will amplify the impact Second Heart Homes can make. Megan tells us about how Fueling Dynamic Fundraising has helped her create a culture of philanthropy. We deep dive into LIA, or Linkage, Interest, and Ability, which was a topic that was discussed at Fueling Dynamic Fundraising. And Megan tells the story of receiving a legacy gift, something that she had never thought about before taking Fueling Dynamic Fundraising. You can learn more about Fueling Dynamic Fundraising through this QR code. And remember to stick around to the end of the podcast episode to hear about the ripple effects that Megan has experienced as a result of attending Fueling Dynamic Fundraising. So without further ado, please welcome Megan Howell. Alrighty, Megan, thank you so much for joining me today. If you would, please just start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your organization.
Yeah, my name is Megan Howell. I'm the executive director and founder of Second Heart Homes, where our mission is to revive the dignity of homeless single adults with mental illnesses through housing, support, and love. I founded this organization in 2019 when I helped a man off the streets who had been homeless for 25 years. He was living on the sidewalk outside of the restaurant I worked at while I was in college. And he was suffering from schizophrenia, had been homeless for a long time, and really needed somebody who wasn't going to dismiss his version of reality. And we built a relationship of friendship. It actually took me 8 years to get him off the streets. So talk about, cultivating and stewarding a relationship. It's built on rapport and trust, just like many other things. So I feel like working in the restaurant industry and kind of organically engaging with the homeless is the foundation for where we're at today. Meeting people where they're at, building that truth and trust and understanding and also love, because love is enduring.
That's absolutely incredible, and I think that the fact that it did take 8 years to make this impact is something that can't be understated. It is a commitment long term, and it's not like this is not an easy problem that you're trying to solve. So thank you for taking those steps that you've taken to create this organization and help so many people. I believe it's 70 plus people you guys have put in through housing. Is that correct?
Yeah, currently we have 11 homes with 2 on the way. So right now we're at capacity. We have 68 men and women off the streets. Now it is permanent housing if someone would like it to be, and it has supportive services. So that's our model: housing, support, and love. Simple enough, right?
Wow.
And
Wow. Yeah.
So some people might use it as a transition to something else, which we help them all along the way. We're helping them obtain income. We're helping them repair relationships, maintain their sobriety, find employment, learning how to use the community too, because being homeless, you don't have the same access and opportunities, right? We want people to improve their physical health, their mental health, and their social well-being. And that's being able to use everything here that's available, like going to the ballet or, going to a poetry meetup. How do you start to have healthy, positive habits if you are just focusing on surviving? So it's more than housing. And it's more than support, it's about being a member of the community.
And something you said right at the beginning there, simple, but not easy. Nothing that you're doing is easy. And along those same lines, we are here today to talk about fueling dynamic fundraising. Fundraising, simple, in terms not easy. And I imagine that you are having to do quite a bit of fundraising to sustain this organization. So if you would just tell us a little bit about fueling dynamic fundraising, and how would you describe it to an organization that might be interested in the program?
Yeah, fueling dynamic fundraising was important for a lot of reasons, but to boil it down, it's really the foundational elements of fundraising, like where you need to root your practices in. You can get creative with your practices, but they all need to kind of tie back to these simple things like relationship building, information, keeping it where it's digestible, keeping people abreast of what's happening and what the issues are and how they can help. I mean, that's kind of the equation, right? And you can't always just be everything's perfect, it's great, we're resolving it, whoa, because then there's no need to fund it. And you can't just go and ask somebody for money and just, and then that's it. That's not sustainable. That doesn't give dignity to the person who wants to support the mission. It doesn't give dignity to the mission recipients, right? We want long-term support and we want authentic support. So that's what the Fueling Dynamic Fundraising helps you do. And whether you're a well-experienced fundraiser or you're starting from nothing, I think it's helpful for everybody. We first applied for it because I have a very unique situation. My lovely assistant and volunteer coordinator, I just really saw a lot of the skill sets and characteristics that would lend to being a great fundraiser. And I worked with a fundraising consultant to come up with a job description, and we began a search. I was interviewing, but just had this nagging feeling that the person we needed was already here. So as I thought about it a bit more and asked a couple people within my circle, said, hey, is this a fever dream? Or does this person have what it takes? I was having a lot of unsolicited compliments to her. Some of our supporters were saying she just made them feel good. And she knows all the stories, arguably loves the mission as much as I do. And I was a waitress and figured out how to create those relationships and commandeer them, and saw the same things within her. So thought, wow, I'd like to make this move, but I want to make it where she has the support that she can be successful. And so if we could both do this training together, how wonderful would that be? And decided to move forward, and then we got to do the training together, and we're suddenly now speaking the same language, right? And looking at the same strategies through the same lens, and just it was invaluable, really. And another person, I reached out to somebody else who was a former cohort of Fueling Dynamic Fundraising. I'm always afraid I'm gonna trip over that. But I try. And I asked, I said, listen, this is what I'm thinking of doing and why, and you went through this, what are your thoughts? And that's exactly what they said. They said it was invaluable. So I think every organization should go through it. And again, your level of fundraising experience, it'll only be enhanced through going through this.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because I actually talked to another organization who they sent two people who had been fundraisers to Fueling Dynamic Fundraising, and they both received so much value from it, even though they had done that for years as their full-time job. And it's just an amazing program. And also, shout out to you for your leadership abilities, the ability to spot talent and put people in the right situations, and then realize that I don't want to throw them out on an island basically, or in the water, and figure out how to swim. Like, we're going to work through this together. We're going to go to Fueling Dynamic Fundraising. We're going to get on the same page, and I'm sure that has helped immensely. So through that answer, you kind of talked about some of the topics from Fueling Dynamic Fundraising. Donor stewardship. You talked about your ability to create relationships, learning that in the restaurant industry. I'm sure that translates to fundraising as well. Your case for support, and then annual fund planning as well. So which of these topics do you think was the most valuable for you individually, and then maybe for your organization as a whole?
So as we're talking about strategy and different pieces of what we learned at Fueling Dynamic Fundraising, one of the things I want to point out that's been helpful for us is the LAI. So that's linkage, how you might know the person, right? Is it through a friend of a supporter, a colleague? It could be, a neighbor, whatever that is, how do they know the organization, which is something we always ask. What about our mission speaks to your heart, and how did you first hear about us, right? So those are two very powerful questions any organization can ask, and you'll just be blown away by what you learn and the perception. But going on to ability, right? Because you have to kind of structure your ask when that time is right based on their ability. You're not going to ask someone for $400,000 if you don't know that there's an opportunity there. If they have a family foundation, that might be a good sign that there's opportunity for a higher ask, right? Or if it's a volunteer, you might be asking for something entirely different, like giving rides to residents for a poetry meetup, right? That's their ability to engage with the mission. So you want to kind of vet that. But I also want to add that you should go big or go home sometimes, because there's been a couple times where one specific instance, somebody asked what our greatest need was, and I said, more houses. They asked how much a home was. I said $400,000. And they said, okay, just call me when you get the check. And they sent a check for $400,000. So, and I had met this person on the phone for a full 20 minutes, had no clue what their ability was, but, I threw something out there to just kind of gauge, right? And, through that, I learned that their ability is greater, and they've since supported us on a higher level because of us being able to identify that ability. And then interest. This is where values come in, and specific interests. Like, for us, we want somebody who, the best supporter of our mission is going to be somebody who's wants to help homelessness, is concerned about mental illness. Maybe they've had a family member or a friend, or they see people when they're downtown, or they're just concerned citizens. They could be business owners, but you want to make sure that you're aligning with what their interest is. We're not going to approach someone, walking their dog and start talking about homelessness. I mean, you could probably link it in there, but, at the end of the day, that's probably not the best use of time, right? Another example, there was like some children's, like pop-up table market, and some of our team members wanted to have a table there, and it's, for like school-age children, like kindergarten. And so I said, I just don't think the linkage is there, or the ability, or the interest. It's just it's a little bummer subject to bring to the kindergartners, and they don't have money, and their parents are busy, and it just it doesn't align with what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, thanks for helping it define LAI or LIA in that case. And I think to me, it really helps emphasize the art and science to fundraising. Like, as you list it out like that, it's like so simple. But, when you're talking on the phone to somebody and they ask, how much is a house? And, you $400,000. Cool. Here it goes. Like, there is art and science to this. Going back to Fueling Dynamic Fundraising, now you learned a lot. It extremely intensive. I believe it was 4 days long, all day for those 4 days. What did you implement first after this training, and what have you intentionally saved for later?
Oh yeah. So first of all, this meeting was in the middle of an Amish bakery for 4 days, which is a little intense. I'm still recovering from that. But we had things that we could act on immediately, which was so cool. Um and it was so timely, right? I had never gone into the discussion of legacy planning, right? I figured, oh, someone will want to talk to us about it. You know, how do you talk about that and say the hard words, right? Um, but we went through legacy planning and talked about it and demystified it. And before the event was even over, I reached out to two of our supporters about legacy planning, and one actually committed $100,000. And it was a simple conversation, and I actually opened it up saying, hey, I'm at this Fueling Dynamic Fundraising training put on by the Patterson Foundation, and I'm learning so much. We had a great discussion about legacy planning, and I figured you might be the one to talk to about it. You know, we had some really good conversations because we even talked about religion too within legacy planning, right? Because that starts to show the value model, right? That someone might be interested in or not. This person, which they've allowed me to share information, they are like a devout Buddhist. And so for them, they want to shed all of their worldly possessions before they die and become reincarnated and all these other things. And in fundraising, we're often talking about Christianity and Judaism and things like that. I had never considered Buddhism, honestly. And it was a really easy conversation to have, which, prior I was really terrified of. And they're like, well, I would absolutely like to help you guys and see that this continues on after I'm gone and on to other things. And, they said they'll commit $100,000, and they got their financial advisor to attend the meeting too. And we got it all taken care of, and said we'll revisit it in later years to see if it needs to be adjusted. And it was just wonderful. And they said that we could use them as an example to talk to other people about legacy planning, because that was another question too. Can we share your story and as testimony to what others can do to follow in your footsteps and help our mission? And they were so happy to have that shared.
And was this prompted by the Fueling Dynamic Fundraising? Did they say, hey, take an hour and call some people? Or was this all, on your own time after this 8-hour session, you made these calls?
Oh, on my own time after the session, I just started thinking and I was excited about it. And, called up this person, just said, hey, this is what I'm going through. It's exciting. What do you think about this? And they were more than receptive. I thought we were just going to have a vigorous conversation and maybe talk about who else we might be able to speak about it with. And, lo and behold, they were ready to support it. So I think that it was a big surprise. The other person, they didn't give a full commitment, but they certainly weren't offended. And that was, I think, my perception prior to taking this training, was that people might be offended when you're talking about that type of commitment. And quite the contrary.
I'm going to transition us here a little bit. So the Patterson Foundation works with people, businesses, nonprofits, government, and media to catalyze efforts toward shared aspirations through 5 key actions: connecting, learning, sharing, evolving, and strengthening. And I want to talk about learning to start off here. You started this out of, the kindness of your heart. You connected with somebody who needed help and you helped them. Now you are the executive director of this organization who has so many people who are relying on you. What have you learned through Fueling Dynamic Fundraising that is going to help sustain this organization? This podcast is Nonprofit Thrivability. We're trying to help organizations become thrivable. So what have you learned from Fueling Dynamic Fundraising to help create a more thrivable organization?
What I've learned from Fueling Dynamic Fundraising to make our organization have thrivability, like that, I got all the words in there,
Yeah.
is that there are fundamentals to a lot of key practices, right? And, if you learn them and implement them and share them, then that's how you're going to thrive. Also, another takeaway from the Fueling Dynamic Fundraising is creating an entire organizational culture of fundraising, right? And this also gave us some of the language to break things down and find other ways for other team members in our organization to engage in fundraising or stewardship or, just demystifying some of it. So if I had to boil everything down to one statement, I'd say knowledge is power. And fundraising shouldn't just be, okay, you guys over here, or, oh, senior leadership. Something everybody can do. And you might have to get creative of how everybody can join in. But it's also really exciting because the best part of fundraising is sharing joy with others and letting them know how they can be a part of that joy. And everybody in the organization, from our property manager to our case managers who are, boots on the ground and the reason our organization exists, and our residents, they can all be a part of it. And for everybody to be on the same page and be intentional about what you're doing, that's huge. One of the activities that we did during the Fueling Dynamic Fundraising was to, grab your phone and shoot a short video, think of a specific person and just say, hey, thinking about you, I'm at this training and I just, want to show my gratitude. You could say any kind of note you wanted to, but pick a person, make a video, send it, right? Awesome. The response that you get back, and it's so simple to do, right? And it means so much, and it's personally tailored, right? Even our residents, the people that we serve, are doing it now. They're picking up the phone, saying, hey, it's my 7-year day sober. And, I just want to say thank you to all the supporters. And, we get to send that out and it crushes people, right? It's really important. So even our residents are part of this fundraising culture, and they feel really good about being able to volunteer back, as they should, because, everybody wants to have, greater purpose. And when our residents are the best fundraisers there are, I'll tell you what. So,
I believe it's seeing the impact and what it really means to people is, I imagine, super helpful for fundraising. People love to help animals and children, but they can't always explain what it is, the impact that the dollars or the commitment has made. But your residents being able to do that, I imagine, is extremely powerful. I want to talk about evolving now and kind of building off this culture of philanthropy that you just talked about. You're involving the culture of the organization. What are some ripple effects that you experienced from being part of Fueling Dynamic Fundraising?
some ripple effects that we've experienced from Fueling Dynamic Fundraising are some key relationships within the community. There's a couple organizations that were in a really similar situation to us. A leader, and then she had promoted somebody from within too. And so we decided that we're going to get together every once in a while and just kind of talk about how that's going, what material we're using, how we're using it, some challenges. By going through this, we've made some really interesting allies and learned an incredible amount about the good work happening in our community. And I think that that's just amazing. My giving challenge list is going to grow so much next year of places we need to support. So that's a ripple effect on my wallet, but a good one.
Yeah. And that's one of the 5 key actions that TPF promotes is connecting, and what a perfect example of that. As we wind down this interview here, what is a cookie from your jar or a piece of advice that you'd offer to somebody else who's thinking about doing Fueling Dynamic Fundraising, or transforming their fundraising abilities, what's a piece of advice you would offer them?
Ooh, a piece of advice that I'd offer someone who's considering joining the Fueling Dynamic Fundraising is to bring along certainly go to it and bring along someone that's not like a usual suspect in your organization, right? We all have operations, which are, boots on the ground, right? And it would serve you well to create a culture of fundraising. It's only going to help. And so bring along somebody who might be from operations or somebody who's a really good connector, that type of thing. So they have the tools that they can really understand how their work translates to fundraising work. And the more cross training and support you have, the stronger your organization becomes.
Wow. Great insight there. Anybody in the organization can help the fundraising campaign. So why not bring somebody else along with you to Fueling Dynamic Fundraising? Megan, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for everything that you're doing in our community. I really appreciate you joining me on this podcast.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And thanks for all you do and the Patterson Foundation. This was a wonderful opportunity that's really benefited our organization and ultimately our residents.
Thank you for listening to the Nonprofit Thrivability podcast by the Patterson Foundation. For more information, please visit www.thepattersonfoundation.org.